I've always liked the quiet. The forest was where I went when the world was too loud, when phones rang too much, when neighbors argued over nothing, when the city lights burned too bright. Out here, the only noise was the rustle of wind through pine needles, the crack of a branch under a deer's hoof, or the distant call of a crow. I used to come for the peace. Now, I stay because it's the only place left that isn't screaming. It's been, I don't know how many days since it started. I stopped counting after 10. My old wristwatch died when I slipped crossing the creek, and I never did have much use for calendars out here anyway. Time doesn't matter much when the world ends. Just light and dark. Warm and cold. Alive or dead. I was already in the forest when it began tracking an elk through the northeast ridge. I had a week's worth of supplies, my old Winchester Model 70, and enough jerky to chew on until my gums bled. I didn't even know anything had happened until I tried to call my sister on the sat phone. No signal. Figured it was just the usual. Then I picked up a signal on my weather band radio, some emergency broadcast out of Anchorage talking about riots, sickness, military lockdowns. By the time I made my way down to the ranger outpost, everything was gone. Burned. Torn. Blood on the windows. No people. Only silence. The first one I saw, the first walker, I guess you could call it, was a woman. Or had been. Hard to say with half her face gone and her jaw hanging crooked. She stumbled across the clearing by the fire tower while I was filling my canteen. I thought she was hurt, maybe a crash victim. I called out. She turned like she heard me, fast, twitchy, and then she ran. I've seen wolves charge prey. I've seen bears lunge through brush. But nothing like that. She didn't run to escape. She ran to kill. I fired a warning shot. She didn't flinch. The second shot hit her in the chest. Dropped her for a second. She got back up. The third went through her eye. That one worked. I buried her. Not because she was still a person, but because some part of me needed to believe I still was. Since then, I've moved deeper into the forest. I've got a small camp about 5 miles from the old ranger station, a spot I used years back during elk season. Sheltered under a rock overhang, with a fresh spring trickling nearby. I've set snares for rabbit and squirrel. Built a small smokehouse out of pine slats. Keeps the meat dry and the scent low. I keep the fire small and only at night. Smoke brings eyes. So far, I've only seen 3 more of them. They don't move in packs, not out here. I guess most of them stayed in the towns, where the bodies piled up. Out here, it's harder for them. They stumble into the trees, get tangled in the brush. I've seen one impaled on a broken limb, thrashing like a pinned insect until it finally went still. But I don't let my guard down. I keep my rifle close. I sleep light. Every morning, I walk a perimeter. Half a mile in every direction, looking for signs, tracks, droppings, broken branches. So far, only deer and the occasional black bear. But yesterday, I found a boot print. Too big for mine. Fresh. Someone else is out here. I don't know if that's good or bad. Tonight, I picked up the radio again. Turned the dial slow, listening past the static. Most channels are dead. A few looped messages, quarantine zones have failed. Avoid metropolitan areas. Shelter in place. But one voice came through clearer than the rest. A man, sounded military. Calm, steady. Said something about a research team in Oregon working on a vaccine. Said they've had success with some test groups. No details. Just, hope. Hope. Funny how a word you never needed before can mean so much now. I sat by the fire for a long time after that, staring into the flames. I haven't seen another living soul in over 2 weeks. Haven't heard laughter, or music, or even a damn engine in the distance. Just wind. Just the trees breathing. But maybe I'm not the last. Maybe someone else heard that broadcast too. And maybe they're headed the same way I am. I'll move again tomorrow. South, toward the river. There's an old trail I used to follow that cuts along the cliffs and bends down toward the valley. I'll set traps along the way and keep close to cover. And I'll keep listening. Because if there's even a chance someone is working on a cure, then I need to live long enough to see it. For now, I sharpen my knives by the firelight, ears tuned to the forest around me. My rifle rests across my lap, and the night stretches quiet and wide ahead. Another day survived. That's all I can ask. I broke camp at first light. There's a stillness that comes with morning frost, especially in late fall. The kind of cold that creeps into your boots and makes your fingers ache before you've even packed your gear. But I moved fast, practiced hands rolling the tarp, dousing the fire, brushing away footprints. Leaving no trace is second nature now. I strapped my rifle across my back and slung the pack tight across my shoulders. Everything I carry now has to earn its weight, no room for comfort, only tools. Flint, rope, small hatchet, 2 knives, the radio, a bit of jerky, a water filter, and a few rounds of .30-06 ammo. That's it. Life trimmed down to its essentials. The trail I was aiming for runs south-southwest, weaving through dense evergreens and rocky ridges. I used to hike it with my father when I was a boy. Back then, it was just a path to fishing spots and deer blinds. Now, it's the only road that might lead me toward that radio signal. Toward hope. I moved slow and silent. A hunter's pace. Every sound felt louder than it should: my breath, the crunch of frost underfoot, the occasional bird call overhead. I didn't see any walkers the first few miles, but that didn't mean they weren't there. They don't groan or moan like in those old movies. Most of them don't make a sound unless they're charging you. One time, I saw one pressed against a birch tree, face rotted, jaw slack. Just standing there, still as stone, like it forgot what it was doing. Then it saw me, locked eyes from 20 feet out, and sprang like a wolf on a rabbit. You don't forget that kind of thing. You don't let your guard down. By midday, I stopped at a rocky outcrop overlooking the valley. The forest stretched out below me like an endless sea of green, broken only by the river glinting in the sun and a line of smoke far off to the southeast. Smoke. Someone's burning something. That meant people. Could be a campfire, could be a signal. Could be survivors or worse. I jotted the direction down in my notebook and moved on. Didn't want to risk it yet. Instead, I descended into the valley, sticking close to a shallow stream that curved alongside the trail. That's where I found the first real sign of someone else. A can of beans. Empty, dented, rusting at the edges, lying half buried in mud near the stream. Not old either, a week, maybe less. Next to it, faint boot prints. Heavy tread. Not mine. I crouched low, scanned the woods. Nothing. No birds either. The absence of birds is something you start to notice after a while. In a healthy forest, there's always sound: squirrels chattering, crows calling, woodpeckers tapping. But when the undead are near, the woods fall still. Nature knows. I moved off the trail, climbing uphill until I found a narrow ledge where I could rest with a clear view in every direction. I didn't build a fire that night. Ate a cold meal: squirrel jerky and wild berries. Stared up at the stars through the trees. It's funny. The sky hasn't changed. It's still the same sky from before. Same constellations. Same moon rising fat and gold. But the world beneath it is broken. Around midnight, I heard footsteps. Light. Cautious. Not like the clumsy, dragging shuffle of a walker. Someone human. I didn't move. Just lay in the shadows with my rifle cradled across my chest, breathing slow. The steps passed 30 feet below me, barely visible in the moonlight: a figure in a coat, moving low to the ground, scanning the woods with something in their hands. Maybe a flashlight. Maybe a weapon. They didn't see me. Didn't stop. Just kept walking southeast toward the smoke. I stayed awake the rest of the night. At dawn, I followed. Didn't want to, but something in my gut told me I had to. Maybe it was the radio message. Maybe it was the beans. Maybe I'm just tired of being alone. I moved faster that day, cutting south through thickets and fallen logs, using game trails where I could find them. I passed 2 abandoned campsites. One had a torn sleeping bag. The other had a child's shoe. I didn't stop. Didn't want to imagine what had happened there. By mid-afternoon, I smelled fire. Not smoke fire, Like meat roasting. Like grease burning on hot stone. My stomach growled, but I didn't move in a straight line. I circled wide, checking wind direction, staying low behind a ridge. That's when I heard the voices. Human. Arguing. Two men. Loud. Careless. And then a woman crying. I crept closer, peered through a gap in the brush. It was a campsite, all right, makeshift tents, a fire ring, a few crates stacked with supplies. One man sat with a rifle across his lap, another was pacing near the fire, yelling at someone inside one of the tents. The woman. She looked young. Maybe late 20s. Dirt-smeared face, tied hands. Terrified. I almost turned away. Almost kept walking. But I couldn't. Not after everything. Not after what the world's become. If I don't do something, then I'm no better than the things that crawl through the night. I backed away slowly and started planning. Tomorrow, I'd do something about it. For tonight, I just waited. Waited, and watched. I didn't sleep much that night. Every rustle in the leaves, every crack of a twig had me gripping the rifle tighter. I watched the camp from a ridge about 40 yards out, just high enough to stay hidden, just close enough to see. The two men had taken turns on watch, lazily pacing by the fire, more interested in keeping warm than staying alert. They were amateurs. Predators, maybe. But sloppy ones. The woman stayed in the tent. I never saw her eat. She didn't come out once. I couldn't hear everything they were saying, but I caught enough. The pacing one, thin, tall, twitchy, kept calling her bait. Said they'd move at dawn. Said they needed more. I knew what kind of people they were then. I rose just before first light, while the stars were still out and the fire had died to coals. That's the hour when the world is at its weakest, when even the birds don't sing, and shadows feel heavier than they should. I circled around the ridge, keeping uphill, stepping carefully to avoid dry leaves. My boots pressed soft into the moss and loam, every movement slow, practiced. I've hunted grizzlies that couldn't hear me coming. Humans are louder, sloppier, and more dangerous. I stopped about 20 feet behind the rear tent, a clear shot to both men if they came out in a panic. I knelt, steadied my breath, and knocked gently on the tent fabric with the barrel of my rifle. The woman inside flinched hard. I could see the silhouette jump. "Quiet," I whispered. "I'm not one of them. Stay down." She didn't answer, but I could hear her breathing rapid, scared. I didn't blame her. One of the men barked. What was that? The other grunted. Probably nothing. I'll check it. Footsteps. Crunching. I waited until I saw him round the side of the tent, the twitchy one, holding a cheap shotgun like he didn't know what end the shell came out of. I stood slow, rifle already aimed. Drop it? He froze. Eyes wide. Mouth moving, no sound. I won't say it twice. The shotgun hit the ground. He raised his hands. I ain't done nothin', he said. Shut up. On your knees. Now. The second guy burst from the other tent, burly, bearded, swinging a hatchet. I fired once, instinct, clean. He dropped like a sack of bricks. The woman screamed. The twitchy guy fell backward, hands still up, babbling something about not meaning harm. I kept my rifle on him, stepped forward, and kicked his shotgun away. You travel with scum, you get treated like scum, I said. I didn't know, he pleaded. We were just trying to survive, man. It's the end of the world. We didn't have a choice. You always have a choice. I zip-tied his wrists with a piece of cord from my pack and dragged him to a tree. Tied him up good and tight. Then I checked the tents. The woman was sitting against the far wall, her hands bound in front of her. Bruised lip. Torn sleeve. Eyes hard as flint. I cut the bindings. She didn't thank me. Didn't have to. Her name was Mara. She had been traveling with a small group family, friends, when they were ambushed near a collapsed bridge to the west. These two took her. The rest, she didn't know. Said she hadn't seen her brother or niece in 4 days. I thought I was going to die here, she said, staring at the fire pit. You still might, I replied. But not today. We didn't bury the bearded man. Not yet. I wasn't going to waste the time or energy while there was a chance the girl's family was still out there. As for the other one, the talker, I left him tied. Gagged him too, eventually. Wouldn't shut up. Begging, whimpering, promising things. I've heard too many lies to care. We took what supplies we could from the camp, canned beans, matches, some water purification tablets, a pack of batteries, good find. Even a flare gun. I gave Mara a small hunting knife from my belt. She held it like she meant to use it. Good. By noon, we were moving again. She didn't slow me down much. Said she grew up hiking with her dad, knew how to handle rough terrain. Didn't talk a lot. But every now and then, she'd glance behind us like something was following. Do you think they'll come after us? She asked. Not the dead ones, I said. They don't care about revenge. The living ones. Maybe. We traveled along the creek for hours. The radio crackled in my pack, but I didn't turn it on. Not until we had somewhere to stop. Somewhere safe. That night, we made camp beneath a thick cedar grove. I showed her how to string up a makeshift tarp using branches and cord. She watched closely, then did half the work herself. Fast learner. She boiled water from the creek while I set a few snares nearby. We ate in silence. Just the wind and the crackle of the fire between us. Then I turned on the radio. Static. More static. Then faintly a voice. This is emergency broadcast station Delta 6, transmitting on open frequency 14.5. If you can hear this, there is still hope. Medical teams are operating near the Cascade outpost. A vaccine is under development. We repeat. Mara leaned forward, eyes wide. You think it's real? She asked. I don't know, I said. But it's the first reason I've had to keep walking. She nodded, slow. Then she said something that surprised me. Well, then I'm walking with you. Morning came colder than usual. I woke before the sun, ears tuned to the wind, hand already wrapped around my rifle. Old habits. Mara stirred not long after, quiet and deliberate. I appreciated that. No complaints, no chatter. She understood the stakes. We ate a quick meal, a few bites of smoked rabbit and a handful of dried berries, then kicked dirt over the fire and packed up. The cedar grove had served us well, but I never stayed in one place longer than a night. Not anymore. Movement meant survival. We continued south, following the creek through a ravine thick with ferns and deadfall. The deeper we went, the darker it got. Sunlight filtered through in slanted beams, catching on the mist that clung to the ground like a ghost. The forest felt older here. Wilder. More dangerous. Mara broke the silence after about an hour. You ever think about how fast it all fell apart? All the time, I said, watching the trail ahead. I mean, one day I was fighting with my brother about who ate the last of the peanut butter. The next, we were running from our neighbors while they tried to chew through the car door. Normal's a fragile thing, I said. Takes a lifetime to build. Only a week to burn. She didn't reply to that. Just nodded. We stopped around midday near a shallow bend in the creek to refill our canteens. That's when I noticed them. Tracks. Boot prints in the soft mud. Fresh. Very fresh. 3 sets adult-sized. Moving west along the water, not much older than a few hours. I crouched and studied them carefully. Wide spacing between steps. No scuff marks. Not walkers. Survivors, I murmured. Mara leaned over my shoulder. Could be my brother and niece. Could be. Or it could be worse. We followed the tracks for about a mile, sticking close but not directly in their trail. No reason to announce ourselves too soon. I've met too many survivors who'd just as soon rob you as share a fire. Eventually, we reached a fallen log and a little clearing beyond it. That's when we heard the voices. A girl young giggling. Then a man's voice, hushed but clear. "Shhh, keep quiet." I motioned for Mara to stay low and circled left through the brush, keeping to the shadows. Through the trees, I spotted them 3 figures near a crude lean-to made from saplings and a tarp. A man, mid-30s maybe, with a rifle on his lap. A woman crouched nearby, tending a small fire. And the girl probably 10 years old twirling a pine cone in her hands. Mara gasped behind me. She stepped out before I could stop her. Jacob. The man snapped up, rifle half raised until he saw her. Mara. They ran to each other like magnets pulling together. Arms around each other. Tears. No words for a full minute. The woman joined them, hugging tight. Even the girl ran over, wide-eyed and smiling. I stayed back, watching. Didn't want to intrude on something that pure. When they finally looked my way, Mara called out, "This is the one who helped me escape. He's the reason I'm still here." The man Jacob walked over, extending a hand. "I owe you my life, then." I shook it. Firm grip. Honest eyes. "They treat you all right?" I asked. He nodded. "We got split up after an ambush. Thought she was gone. Been searching for 2 days. They were headed west," Mara said. "Didn't know I was being held just over the ridge." The girl peeked out from behind him. "You have a gun?" I gave a small smile. "A few." She nodded approvingly and retreated behind her mother again. We shared the clearing that night. Sat around their small fire eating a meal that tasted better for the company: venison stew from Jacob's hunt, mixed with the last of my dried carrots. Mara's niece, Ellie, talked more than the rest of us combined. Asked about bears, guns, zombies, radio towers, and if I'd ever eaten raccoon. Yes. Twice. Not proud. After dinner, Jacob pulled out a small solar-powered crank radio, newer than mine, clearer signal. We sat in a circle, listening. The same voice came through. Calm. Reassuring. "If you are within 300 miles of the Cascade outpost, continue heading south. We are working on a solution. Evacuation plans are underway. Stay safe. Stay alive. Help is coming." The voice clicked off, followed by static. I looked at Jacob. "We're about 180 miles out," he said. I nodded. "Close enough to try." After the fire died down, we sat beneath the stars. "You got a name?" Jacob asked me. I poked the coals with a stick, thinking. "Cole." "Nice to meet you, Cole." "Likewise." I took the first watch that night, perched on a log with my rifle across my knees, eyes scanning the trees for movement. The others slept peacefully. That was something I hadn't seen in weeks: people sleeping without fear. Maybe that voice on the radio wasn't just static after all. Maybe it was a beacon. The forest felt heavier the next morning. Even the birds seemed hesitant, their chirps faint and scattered. I've spent enough time out here to know when something's off, when the wind carries a different kind of silence. The animals know first. Always. We moved early. Packed up the camp, covered our tracks. Mara and her family stuck close. Ellie walked beside me, peppering me with questions again, mostly about how to shoot, how to set traps, how many zombies I'd killed. Jacob tried to quiet her, but I told him it was fine. It's good for a kid to be curious. Better than scared. By midday we'd reached a split in the old trail. One path sloped down toward the river, wide and open. The other led through a gorge, narrow, rocky, and tight. Jacob motioned toward the river path. Easier to walk, might even spot a fish or two. Too exposed, I replied. Flat terrain, nowhere to run if we get hit. Gorge gives us cover. He looked at the sky. And if the rocks give out, then we dig our way out. Or we don't. But I'd rather take a landslide than teeth. He didn't argue after that. We entered the gorge single file. The trees thinned out, replaced by sheer stone walls and overhanging ledges. The sun disappeared behind gray cliffs. It felt like walking into a giant throat. I took the lead. Mara behind me. Then Ellie, clutching her mother's hand. Jacob brought up the rear. We'd only gone half a mile before the smell hit us. Rot. Old blood. Mildew. I raised a fist, stopped the line. Everyone froze. I crouched near a boulder, scanned the rocks ahead. At first, I didn't see anything. Then, behind a fallen log, something moved. It wasn't fast. It wasn't loud. Just, wrong. I motioned for Jacob to cover the others and moved forward slowly, rifle up. As I rounded the log, I saw them. 3 walkers. All tangled in a pile of limbs and teeth, chewing on what was left of a deer carcass. Flies swarmed over their backs. One had antlers jammed through its abdomen, probably tried to wrestle the buck when it was still alive. They didn't notice me right away. Too focused on the feast. I lined up the first shot, took the head clean off. The second stood and shrieked. Stupid mistake. It echoed through the gorge like a gunshot. I dropped the second with a shot to the neck. The third lunged faster than I expected, but I sidestepped and drove my knife into its skull. Quiet again. For a moment. Then the echoes returned. But this time, they weren't from my rifle. They were answering calls. Dozens of them. We ran. There wasn't time to be quiet anymore. The sound of boots against stone, panicked breath, the scrape of gear, it filled the gorge like a drum beat. The walkers were coming from everywhere, from cracks in the cliffs, from behind boulders, some even tumbling down the sides like broken marionettes. They weren't smart. But they didn't need to be. They had numbers. I fired as I ran, aiming only when it counted. Mara had the flare gun. Jacob had his bolt-action rifle. I tossed Ellie my spare hunting knife, just in case. By the time we reached the end of the gorge, I'd dropped 6. Jacob got 2 more. Mara shot one clean in the chest with the flare. It screamed like burning plastic and lit up like a torch. That slowed the others down. Just enough. We burst into a clearing on the far side of the gorge, lungs burning, legs shaking. I spun and dropped the last 2 that had followed us out. Then silence again. Real silence. The kind that felt earned. Ellie was crying quietly. Her mother hugged her tight. Jacob checked our backs, breathing hard, sweat pouring down his face. I thought this path was supposed to be safer, he said between breaths. It was, I said. Something drove them here. Mara glanced at me. You mean us? No. We didn't draw that many. They were moving already. Like they were being herded. Jacob looked pale. Herded by what? I didn't answer. Because I didn't know. We stayed in the clearing a while, regaining our strength. Set up a small perimeter, stacked rocks at the entrance to the gorge as a warning for anyone else. Or maybe just for ourselves. While the others rested, I climbed the nearest ridge to scout the area. From the top, I could see the mountains farther south, snow caps gleaming in the sun. In the distance, plumes of smoke rose from 2 different locations. One too thick and black to be natural. The other, thinner, steady. Like a chimney. Might be survivors. Might be trouble. I marked both in my notebook. That night, we didn't make a fire. Too risky after the gorge. We ate cold again what little we had left. Ellie was quiet for the first time. Staring at the stars. Mara sat beside me as I checked the radio. Same voice. Same message. Cascade Outpost, research continues, vaccine nearing next phase, stay strong. I turned the dial lower and let it fade. You believe it yet? She asked. I want to, I said. She looked at me, then at Ellie. I need to. We didn't speak after that. Just listened to the wind move through the trees. Another day survived. But the air was different now. Something's stirring in the woods. I can feel it. The morning mist rolled over the forest like smoke from a dying fire. Everything was damp, the trees, the moss, our boots. Our clothes clung to our skin, and the chill made our breath steam with every exhale. Still, we moved. Quiet and steady. We had 2 objectives now, find shelter and resupply. We'd used up most of our meat, and our water filter was starting to clog. Ellie was lagging, not that she complained. The girl was tougher than some grown men I've hunted with, but I could see it in her eyes. She needed rest. We all did. Jacob mentioned a fishing cabin he remembered from years ago. Said it was near a small lake just a few miles southeast. If it hadn't been ransacked or overrun, it might be just what we needed. That was good enough for me. The trail bent east around a patch of marshland. I led the group along a narrow ridge to avoid the mud. About halfway across, I spotted a crow perched in a tree stump, motionless. Usually, they scatter when people approach, squawk, flutter, raise hell. This one just stared. Then it flew off suddenly, like something startled it. A moment later, we heard it a growl, low and wet, like someone gargling broken glass. Walker. 1, maybe 2. I signaled for everyone to freeze. The sound came from below the ridge, near the edge of the swamp. I crawled forward and peered down through the brambles. 3 of them. Half submerged in muck, arms flailing, jaws snapping as they struggled to move through the mud. One had no lower body at all, just a torso dragging itself through reeds like a snake. The other 2 were in worse shape. Swollen. Rotted. They weren't a threat. But they were a reminder. The world hadn't forgotten us. By mid-afternoon, we reached the lake. It was beautiful in a sad kind of way. Still waters reflecting the cloudy sky. Pines lining the shore like silent sentinels. And there, at the edge, the cabin. Old but intact. Small pier stretching out into the water, and an overturned canoe beside it. We approached cautiously, guns drawn. No movement. I crept up to the door and knocked, out of habit, maybe. Nothing. I turned the knob and stepped inside, sweeping the corners with my rifle. Clear. Dust covered everything, shelves, furniture, even the floor, but there were no signs of struggle. No blood. No broken glass. Just silence and old air. Mara checked the back room. Empty. 2 cots, some canned food. Looks like no one's been here in months. Ellie found a box of matches and a deck of cards in a drawer. She lit up like it was Christmas morning. We settled in fast. Jacob and I secured the windows with wooden planks we found in the shed. Mara boiled lake water over the wood stove. I set snares around the perimeter and carved notches into a tree to mark distance from camp. Every motion, every task, it was like muscle memory. I'd done this before. Maybe not here, but in enough hunting lodges and survival camps to know how to make a place feel defensible. Comfortable was a different story. That night, we ate canned potatoes and fish Mara caught using a piece of line and a rusty hook. It tasted like metal and salt. Best meal I'd had in weeks. Ellie taught us all a card game she called the Apocalypse Go Fish. In her version, face cards were zombies, and if you got all 4, you had to yell run, and drop your hand. She laughed so hard when Jacob lost 3 hands in a row. For the first time, I saw her act like a child again. That hit harder than it should have. After Ellie went to sleep, Jacob and I sat on the porch, watching the lake under moonlight. "She's different since we found you," he said. "Calmer. She's adjusting." He shook his head. "No, she believes again. That we might actually make it? That there's a future." I stared out across the still water. "Maybe there is." "You think that radio signal's real?" "I think someone out there wants us to believe it's real. And for now, that's enough." We took turns on watch. I drew the midnight shift. The forest was quiet again. But not dead. I could hear owls calling in the distance. Crickets in the grass. A splash from a beaver near the far shore. I sat on the porch with my rifle across my lap, listening to the night breathe. Then I heard something else. A whisper. Faint. Crackling. Coming from the radio inside the cabin. I went in, slowly, and turned the dial. The voice came through again, but different this time. "Urgent. This is Delta 6. We are initiating Phase 2 of evacuation. If you're within the Cascade perimeter, move southwest. Coordinates, repeat. 47.823-121.547. The signal faded, then cut to static. I grabbed my notebook and wrote it down. Coordinates. A real location. Now we had a heading. I told the others in the morning. Jacob checked the map. That's in Washington. Foothills of the Cascades. We're still over 150 miles out. "I know," I said. "But we've come this far." Mara nodded. "We'll go. Just, maybe one more night here." I agreed. We needed the rest. And we needed to gather supplies before moving again. This cabin wasn't home. But it was the closest thing we'd found to safety. Even if it wouldn't last. I spent the afternoon carving a mark into the doorframe. A simple hunter's sign. 3 vertical lines. It means, "Safe for now." Maybe someone else will find it. Maybe they'll get one night of peace too. We stayed one more day at the cabin, just like we planned. But plans, I've learned, don't mean much anymore. Not in this world. The day started like any other, quiet, gray skies hanging low over the lake, the trees swaying just slightly, whispering things I couldn't understand. I spent the morning checking traps. 1 rabbit. Not bad. I gutted and cleaned it near the edge of the treeline, trying to keep the blood scent far from camp. Mara and Jacob collected wood. Ellie made a game of it, competing with her dad over who could carry more. Her laughter echoed through the trees. That sound pure, innocent. It made me feel like maybe all this wasn't for nothing. We should have left right then. Taken our supplies and gone south. But I ignored the itch in the back of my neck, the old hunter's instinct that said, "Move now." I told myself it was just nerves. Around midday, I noticed the first sign. Footprints. Not ours. Heavy boot prints, sunk deep in the muddy trail west of the cabin. Fresh. Less than a day old. I followed them for about 100 yards before they disappeared near the creek. No drag marks. Not infected. These were people. Probably armed. I didn't tell the others right away. No sense in alarming them if they were just passing through. But I doubled the perimeter traps and set a tripwire alarm with an old tin can and some fishing line. Crude, but enough to buy us a second or two if things went bad. As the sun started dropping, the lake changed. I don't know how to explain it. The light dimmed too quickly, like something was pulling the sun under the water. The trees seemed darker. Closer. Even the birds stopped singing. Ellie noticed it too. She stayed close to me, quiet for once, twirling a long stick in the dirt while I cleaned my rifle. "Do you think they're coming?" she asked. "Who?" "The monsters." I looked at her. "Not tonight." She nodded slowly. "You're a good liar," she said. I didn't know whether to be proud or ashamed. That night, I took first watch. I sat by the front window, rifle across my lap, eyes scanning the tree line. The moon was full, but cloud cover made the world dim like looking through fogged glass. The others were asleep. Jacob snored lightly. Mara tossed and turned, murmuring something in her dreams. Ellie slept curled up under a wool blanket, holding the old deck of cards like a stuffed animal. I heard the first splash just after midnight. Something in the lake. I stood, crept onto the porch, and scanned the water. Another splash closer. A dark shape moved under the surface, slow and smooth. Not a beaver. Not a fish. It rose near the edge of the pier. A human head. Rotten. Pale. Hair floating like seaweed. Eyes milky white. Then another. And another. 3 walkers. They'd crawled through the swamp. Followed the scent, maybe. Or maybe they just wandered blindly and got lucky. Either way, they were here now. I raised my rifle. Crack. One down. The others turned toward the sound, mouths open in silent hunger. Crack. Crack. The last one dropped into the shallows, arms twitching as it sank. The water stilled. But then I heard something else. The tin can alarm. It rattled once. Then silence. I rushed inside and shook Jacob. "We've got company." "Not biters. People." His eyes went wide. He was up in an instant, pistol in hand. I woke Mara next. Whispered low and fast. "Take Ellie into the back room. Stay quiet. Lock the door." She didn't argue. I took position near the front door. Jacob crouched behind the table. We waited. Nothing. Then. A knock. 3 slow, deliberate knocks. I looked at Jacob. He nodded once. I opened the door just a crack. 2 men stood there. One tall, gaunt. The other stockier, wearing a patchwork vest made of old military gear. Both armed. "Evening," the tall one said. "Didn't mean to startle you." "You did," I said. He smiled. "Yellow teeth." We saw smoke. Figured it might be folks worth talking to. "We're looking for a girl. About 10. Brown hair. Might be with a couple adults." My blood turned cold. I didn't answer. The stocky one stepped forward. "You haven't seen her, have you?" "No," I lied. "Just me and my dog." They looked past me, trying to peer inside. I kept the door mostly shut. The tall one raised a hand. "Mind if we come in?" "Just to warm up. We got trade goods. Ammo, even." "I'm not interested." Silence. Then his smile faded. "Well," he said, "that's a shame." He reached for something, maybe a knife, maybe not, but I didn't wait to find out. I slammed the door shut, bolted it, and dove to the side just as the first shot punched through the wood. Gunfire exploded. Jacob returned fire, blowing a hole through the window frame. I rolled behind the couch and covered the doorway. "Back room!" I shouted. "Go out the window. Take Ellie and run." Mara didn't hesitate. I heard the back window shatter. I fired twice more. One man screamed. The tall one, I think. Then silence. Jacob crept to the window, peered out. "They're gone. For now." We packed fast. Took only what we could carry. Canned food, rifles, 2 blankets. I grabbed the map and the notebook with the coordinates. The lake cabin was no longer safe. We hiked south through the night, sticking close to the tree line. Every sound made us freeze. Every shadow felt like a threat. Ellie never asked who the men were. She didn't need to. Sometimes, the living are worse than the dead. We camped under an old pine tree as the first light bled into the sky. Exhausted. Dirty. Cold. But alive. I stoked a small fire with dry pine needles, just enough to warm our hands. Jacob passed around a can of peaches. We ate in silence. Then Ellie spoke. "You think they'll come back?" "Maybe," I said. "But they won't find us." She nodded, then looked up. "What about the people on the radio? The ones with the vaccine?" I met her gaze. "We'll find them. I promise." And this time, I meant it. We moved at dawn. The air was thick with fog, curling through the trees like ghost breath. It muffled our footsteps, made the forest feel older, quieter. Every step forward felt like we were leaving something behind, not just the cabin, but the last bit of safety we'd known. Ellie walked beside me, her small pack bouncing with each step. She didn't complain, just kept up, eyes scanning the trail like she was born to it. Jacob trailed behind, always watching our six, rifle low and ready. Mara stayed close to Ellie, her face hard but focused. No one spoke much. There was no need. Silence had become its own kind of language. We followed the edge of the ridgeline, the terrain getting steeper the farther south we went. The idea was simple: keep moving, keep quiet, keep away from roads and towns. Most of the undead had followed population centers. In the woods, they were scattered. Easier to avoid. Easier to take down. I'd memorized an old ranger map of the area years ago. There was a fire lookout tower about 10 miles south of the lake. If it was still standing, it'd give us elevation, shelter, and a line of sight for miles. We needed all three. Around mid-morning, we came across the remnants of an old campsite: torn tent, scattered clothes, a rusted folding chair. Signs of struggle were everywhere. I crouched low, examining a dark stain on the leaves. "Blood," I muttered. Jacob stepped around the shredded tent fabric. "You think it was infected?" I looked at the claw marks on a nearby tree. 4 long grooves. Deep. Could have been. But it was at least a week ago. Mara kept Ellie back. "Let's not stick around." I agreed. We moved on. By noon, the fog had lifted and the sun had started beating down hard. I'd rationed our water carefully, but we needed a refill. I remembered a stream not far off the trail, spring-fed and clean last time I'd checked. We cut east, descending a rocky slope into a thick grove of spruce and alder. The stream was still there. Shallow and fast-moving. Jacob and I took turns filtering and filling our canteens while Mara kept watch. Ellie knelt beside the water and watched small silver fish dart between the rocks. "You ever fish?" I asked her. She nodded. "With a bobber. My dad taught me. Back before everything." I smiled faintly. "We'll fish again someday. You'll see." Her eyes lit up, even if only for a second. We were just finishing up when I heard it, the low, wet groan of something that should have stayed dead. It came from the trees behind us. I dropped the canteen and raised my rifle. "Eyes up!" I shouted. A figure stumbled out of the shadows, arms twisted at wrong angles, mouth slack, dragging one leg like it was broken at the knee. Another groan echoed. Then another. They were close. "Move!" I barked. "Back uphill now." We scrambled. Jacob stayed behind just long enough to fire a single round into the closest biter's skull. It crumpled, face first, into the dirt. 2 more came lurching from the brush. I dropped one with a clean shot to the eye. Jacob nailed the other in the throat. Didn't kill it, but slowed it long enough for me to get Mara and Ellie up the slope. We didn't stop moving until we hit higher ground. Later that afternoon, the trees began to thin, and the fire lookout came into view. It stood like a skeleton against the sky, tall, rusted, missing some railing, but still upright. The wooden steps creaked under our weight as we climbed. My legs burned from the steep incline, but I didn't dare slow. At the top, the view punched the breath right out of me. Mountains in the distance. A ribbon of river cutting through the valley below. And just to the southwest, thin trails of smoke rising. A camp, maybe. Or something worse. Still, it meant people. And that meant a chance. The tower had clearly been abandoned for years, but it was mostly intact. A small bunk, dusty gear lockers, and best of all a shortwave radio. It looked old, but functional. I pulled the dust cover off and started checking connections. Jacob found a hand crank battery charger in one of the drawers and started winding it. The radio crackled. A few seconds later, a voice came through, faint, warped by distance and static, but real. Repeat, shelter established at grid location 17 Lima, temporary vaccine distribution in effect, all non-infected welcome, bring supplies, identification if possible. Mara covered her mouth. Ellie gasped. I grabbed the map from my bag and spread it out on the floor. Grid 17 Lima. It was over 100 miles away. Maybe more. Through forest, ruined towns, who knew how many infected? But it was hope. It was something to aim for. That night, we stayed in the tower. Jacob and I took turns on watch. The wind howled around the frame, but it held. Mara wrapped Ellie in a sleeping bag and hummed to her softly. I caught her whispering prayers. I didn't blame her. If there's a God out there, he's been awfully quiet. Still, I sat with my back to the wall, watching the dark woods below, rifle in hand, hope in my chest like a small flickering flame. We weren't just surviving anymore. Now, we had a destination. Now, we had a reason. I woke to the soft creak of wood under shifting weight. Jacob was already up, crouched by the window with the binoculars. The rising sun bathed the trees in a golden mist. The tower swayed slightly in the wind, like a boat at sea. See anything? I asked, my voice still rough with sleep. He handed me the binoculars without a word and pointed. Far in the distance past a line of broken hills, smoke. Thinner now, more spread out. Not wildfires. Cook fires, maybe. Camp activity. Or worse, burning bodies. I scanned for movement. Too far to tell for sure, but something about the direction gave me a chill. It was southwest. Same direction as the shelter the radio mentioned. After a quick breakfast of dry jerky and boiled stream water, we packed up. I took one last look around the tower. It had served us well, but we couldn't linger. Not when time was against us. We had distance to cover, and it wasn't going to get easier. I left a charcoal message on the inside wall for anyone else who might make it. Alive and heading southwest. Safe shelter reported on radio. Grid 17 Lima. Trust no one infected. We descended quietly. The steps creaked, and the air was crisp. Ellie looked back up at the tower once before whispering, "Goodbye." We hiked hard that morning. I kept to deer trails where I could, avoiding game paths that ran close to human roads or old logging sites. Wildlife moved differently since the outbreak: squirrels, birds, even bears. They were quieter, more alert. Almost like they sensed the change in us. By midday, we reached a large glade flanked by a narrow creek. I signaled for a break. Jacob and I took turns checking the perimeter. That's when I saw the fresh tracks. Boot prints. At least 3 sets. Heavy, but not staggered or erratic. Not infected. People. I knelt, tracing one with my fingers. The tread pattern was sharp. Not more than a few hours old. Survivors, I whispered. Mara tensed. Could be raiders. Or someone like us, I said. Jacob lifted his rifle and scanned the tree line. We're not alone out here. I nodded. We move quiet from here on. No campfires. No shouting. And we double the watches tonight. As the sun dipped behind the western peaks, we set up a cold camp beneath a rock outcrop. The canopy above gave us decent cover, and a fallen tree made a natural windbreak. We ate in silence, the mood heavy. Later that night, while Mara and Ellie slept, Jacob and I shared a watch under the stars. "Think that shelter's real?" he asked suddenly. I didn't answer right away. The radio had crackled only briefly. No repeating signal. No coordinates we could verify. Could have been an old transmission looping. Could have been bait. But still, something about the tone of the voice, calm, practiced. Like a man who'd spoken into radios his whole life. "Yeah," I finally said. "I think it is." Jacob nodded and leaned back against his pack. "You know," he said, "before this all started, I worked a desk job. Accounting. I hated it." I chuckled softly. "You're not half bad with a rifle. Learned quick." "No choice." He looked at the stars. "Out here, I feel more alive than I ever did in an office." I understood what he meant. The wild stripped everything down: no deadlines, no bills, no noise. Just survival. And that, weirdly, felt more honest than the old world ever had. Just past midnight, I heard something. A twig snapping. Jacob and I both froze. Another snap. Then the faint shuffle of leaves. We rose quietly, rifles ready. I motioned for him to stay with the girls and crept toward the sound. There, in the shadows between two old pine trunks, a figure moved. Not shambling. Cautious. Watching. I stepped out into the moonlight, rifle raised. Stop right there. The figure froze. A man, maybe in his 30s. Lean, with a hunting vest and a backpack slung over one shoulder. He raised his hand slowly. "Don't shoot," he whispered. "I'm not infected." I narrowed my eyes. "Step into the light." He did. Gaunt face, sunken eyes. He hadn't eaten well in weeks, but there were no signs of rot, no clouded gaze, no twitching. Just exhaustion. "I'm Owen," he said. "Been following you since the ridge. I saw the girl, figured you weren't raiders. You saw us and still decided to approach." I asked. He nodded. "I heard the same radio message. Figured if I tried alone, I wouldn't make it. Strength in numbers." I didn't lower the rifle. "Why should I trust you?" "Because I've got this." He slowly pulled a folded map from his vest pocket and tossed it toward me. I opened it. Grid 17 Lima was marked. Circle drawn around a hill range. There were notes, coordinates, food caches, zombie density estimates. He'd been planning this trip for weeks. "I've been tracking patrol routes. They're using drones near the camp. That means power. That means a lab or a military hub." Jacob stepped up behind me. We let him join us. I looked Owen in the eye. "You'll carry your weight. No arguments. No secrets." He nodded. "I've buried 3 people since this started. I'm not here to make enemies." We returned to camp. Mara didn't like the idea, but when Owen shared what he knew about the rivers ahead, the raider roadblocks, the rumored safe zones that turned out to be traps, even she had to admit he might be useful. Ellie sat beside him near dawn, asking questions about the drone he claimed to have seen. For the first time since the outbreak, I felt like we were part of something bigger than just surviving day to day. A team. A pack. Maybe that was enough to make it through what came next. The river was wider than I expected. We'd been following small creeks and streams for days, but this one was a wall of rushing water, cold and fast enough to knock a man off his feet. Owen's map showed a bridge a few miles downstream, but I wasn't convinced it was still standing. We needed to cross it. The radio coordinates lay on the other side, and every mile counted. We approached the bank carefully, the sound of water crashing over rocks echoing through the trees. Jacob tested the current with a long stick. Strong. Deep. Mara scanned the far side with binoculars. No walkers visible. Good. But that didn't mean it was safe. Ellie clung to Mara's hand, eyes wide. I knelt beside her. "We're going to cross the river. You'll be okay." She nodded, gripping my hand tightly. The bridge was a ruin. Collapsed in parts, the wooden planks missing or rotted away. The metal beams sagged, rusted through. No way to cross without risk. We searched the area and found a fallen tree spanning the river farther downstream. It looked sturdy enough to support our weight, but it was slick with moss and angled sharply. One false step and we'd be swept away. I went first, steady and slow. Feet sliding on wet bark, heart pounding with every inch. Halfway across, I heard a sudden crack. The tree shuddered under me. I froze. The others waited breathless on the shore. The crack came again, louder. I made a run for it, sliding my hands over the mossy bark, pushing past the break in the trunk. Made it. I turned back and waved them over. Jacob crossed next, more cautious, testing each step before committing. Mara helped Ellie, holding her hand as the girl shuffled over, eyes squeezed shut. Owen followed last, steady and sure. Once across, we huddled, catching our breath. The river had nearly swallowed us whole. We made camp not long after, settling near an old logging road. The trees here were taller, denser. The air smelled of pine and decay. It was quiet, almost too quiet. That night, while I kept watch, I thought about the world we'd lost. Cities swallowed by rot. Families torn apart. Dreams burned down with the first screams. But also about the people who kept fighting. Who refused to give up. Mara's family. Owen. Ellie's laughter. That's what kept me moving. Before dawn, we broke camp and moved south again. The trail ahead was rough fallen trees, thick underbrush, but the promise of shelter pushed us forward. Every mile was a battle. But we were winning. The old logging road was more broken than I remembered, barely more than a shadow beneath the overgrown brush and fallen limbs. Years of neglect had let the forest reclaim what was once a lifeline for trucks hauling timber out of these mountains. But for us, it was a path, a thread leading southward, and that was enough. We moved carefully, stepping over shattered asphalt and weaving through trees that had pushed up through cracks in the ground. The silence around us was heavy. Too heavy. You learn to listen in the wilderness, to the rustle of leaves, the crack of a twig, the distant call of a hawk. But here, something was off. Even the wind seemed to hesitate. Jacob was scanning ahead with his rifle at the ready. Mara kept Ellie close, her eyes sharp. Owen walked beside me, map in hand, pointing out landmarks I'd long forgotten. The promise of the shelter drove us on. It was more than hope now, it was a mission. Midway through the morning, the forest began to thin, and the road widened into what was once a busy highway. The smell hit us before we saw anything: smoke, bitter and acrid, carrying the unmistakable scent of burning rubber and charred wood. Up ahead, a car lay overturned, blackened and gutted, its windows shattered. The road was littered with debris, abandoned backpacks, scattered papers, a child's doll missing an eye. I motioned for silence. We moved slower now, every step measured. Then I saw them, figures at the roadside. Not moving like the dead, but crouched low, hurried. Survivors. Raiders. Impossible to tell at first glance. I stepped forward with my rifle steady. "Hold your fire," I whispered. "Let's see who they are." As we approached, a woman with tired eyes looked up and waved cautiously. Behind her, two kids, a boy and a girl, huddled under a tattered blanket. Mara stepped forward. "We're not here to hurt you. Are you alone?" The woman shook her head. "No. There's more of us, down the road a few miles. But we're pinned. Raiders took the last bridge." Jacob frowned. "Raiders again? That means trouble." I nodded. "We'll help you get across. Then all of us can move together." The woman's eyes widened. "You'd do that?" We didn't answer with words. Instead, I set to work. Using rope from my pack, some scraps of wood, and old climbing gear Owen had salvaged, we fashioned a pulley system to lower a makeshift zip line across a narrow gorge that split the road. It wasn't perfect, but it was enough. One by one, the woman's group crossed, moving cautiously and silently. Ellie clung to Mara's hand, watching wide-eyed. The last to cross was the woman herself. She turned to me, gratitude shining in her eyes. "Thank you. We stick together now," I said. As the sun dipped low, our enlarged group camped near a dry creek bed. We shared stories in hushed tones of lost families, close calls, and the relentless hunger of the dead. The children played quietly, their laughter a fragile thread in the darkness. Before sleep, I tuned the radio again. The voice came through clearer this time, a steady signal repeating coordinates, warnings, and that familiar hope, a vaccine in progress. I looked at Mara and Ellie, feeling the weight of it all. Tomorrow, we'd move closer. One step at a time, toward survival. The day wore on, thick with heat and tension as our small group pushed forward along the cracked highway, leaves crunching underfoot and shadows growing longer with the setting sun. Every snap of a twig, every rustle in the underbrush, had us stiffening, alert and ready. I led the way, rifle scanning the tree line, while Mara stayed close to Ellie, whispering soothing words. The children clung to their new family, faces pale but determined. Owen and Jacob covered our rear, eyes sharp for any sign of trouble. We'd come too far to be careless. Around dusk, the forest thickened again, closing in like a living wall. The fading light made it hard to see. But I caught movement in the corner of my eye, a flicker, a shadow that didn't belong. "Stop," I hissed, raising my hand. We froze. From the bushes, a low growl rose. Two figures stepped into the clearing, infected, their bodies twisted and rotted, eyes glowing faintly in the dark. They lunged without warning. I fired first, 2 shots to the head. The first fell instantly, the second staggered before collapsing. Jacob took out the second infected with a swift shot to the neck. Mara grabbed Ellie, pulling her behind a fallen log as the rest of us checked the perimeter. The forest was silent again, but our nerves were raw. We pressed on, moving cautiously, knowing more could be lurking. That night, we camped in a small clearing surrounded by tall pines. I set traps and alarms while Mara tended to scratches and bruises the kids had picked up. Owen and Jacob took shifts watching, the weight of exhaustion heavy on all of us. Around midnight, I heard voices. Low and angry, coming from the south. Raiders. I grabbed my rifle, motioning silently for Owen and Jacob. We crept toward the sound, stepping carefully through the undergrowth. Ahead, a group of men stood around a fire, rifles resting beside them, talking in harsh tones about supplies and territory. They hadn't noticed us. I counted 8. Too many for a fight. We retreated without a sound, hearts pounding. Back at camp, I shared what I'd seen. We can't risk running into them, I said. We have to find another route. The group agreed, tension thick in the air. The next morning, we skirted around the raiders' territory, moving through dense brush and rough terrain. The children stumbled but pressed on, trusting the adults to keep them safe. Ellie looked up at me. Will we ever be safe again? I swallowed hard. I don't know. But we're going to try. The radio crackled again that evening, clearer this time. The message was short but hopeful, vaccination trials showing promise, safe zones expanding. I replayed the coordinates and committed them to memory. Maybe, just maybe, there was a light at the end of this long, dark tunnel. We moved cautiously through the dense forest, keeping our pace steady but slow. The underbrush was thick, branches scratching at our clothes and faces, but it was better than the open roads. The risk of running into raiders or larger groups of infected was far less here. I took the lead, eyes constantly scanning for signs of movement, while Jacob stayed close behind, rifle ready. Mara kept Ellie close, whispering words of comfort to keep the girl calm. Owen helped carry supplies, moving quietly but efficiently. The promise of the shelter was our beacon, but the journey there was proving to be more treacherous than any of us expected. As the sun dipped low in the sky, we stumbled upon a narrow path hidden beneath a thick canopy of pine. It wasn't on Owen's map, but it looked well-used. Footprints and broken branches told a story of recent passage. I signaled for the group to halt and listened closely. The forest was eerily silent. Even the birds had stopped their songs. I motioned forward cautiously, making sure everyone stayed close. The trail led us to a small clearing where an old cabin stood, partially hidden by trees and vines. It looked abandoned but sturdy, with a stone chimney that might still work. Mara and I exchanged a quick look. It was the perfect place to rest and regroup. We approached slowly, weapons raised. The door creaked as I pushed it open, revealing a dusty interior filled with old furniture and a wood stove. The air inside was stale but dry, better than sleeping outside. We cleaned the cabin as best we could, setting up a small fire in the stove. Ellie explored cautiously, her eyes wide with wonder. It was the first place in weeks that felt remotely safe and warm. That night, as we settled in, the radio crackled softly. I tuned it carefully and caught fragments of a broadcast, reports of safe zones being established, vaccine trials progressing, and aid convoys moving in from the south. The voice was steady, reassuring, a stark contrast to the chaos outside. Hope filled the room. That night, the forest seemed to hold its breath. I took first watch, sitting near the cabin window, rifle resting on my knees. The moon cast silver light through the trees, shadows dancing on the walls. My mind wandered to the people who might be out there, others like us, fighting to survive, holding on to hope. I thought of the family we'd rescued, the sacrifices we'd made, and the uncertain road ahead. Around midnight, a faint noise caught my attention, a soft tapping at the back door. I motioned for Jacob, and we moved silently to investigate. Peering outside, we saw a figure crouched low, soaked and shivering. I whispered, "Who's there?" The figure stood slowly, raising hands in peace. It was a young woman, barely older than Ellie, eyes wide with fear and exhaustion. "Please," she said, voice trembling. "I'm alone. I need help." We brought her inside and offered what little food and warmth we could. Her name was Lily, and she told us of a nearby group of survivors hiding in a cave system just a few miles away. They were running low on supplies and desperate for safe passage to the shelter we sought. Mara wrapped a blanket around her and whispered softly, promising safety. The next morning, we debated. Helping Lily meant risking exposure, but leaving people behind wasn't an option anymore. We agreed to guide her to the cave and then move toward the shelter together. The group had grown, but so had our resolve. As we prepared to leave the cabin, Ellie tugged at my sleeve. "Do you think the vaccine will really work?" I smiled, pulling her close. "I believe it will. And we're going to be part of making sure it does." With the rising sun, we stepped out of the cabin and back into the wilderness, hearts heavier but hope stronger than ever. The path to the cave was rough and winding, cutting through thick underbrush and rocky terrain. Lily led the way, her steps sure despite the exhaustion that shadowed her face. We followed quietly, knowing the importance of staying alert. Every rustle of leaves, every distant caw of a crow, made our nerves taut like bowstrings. As we neared the cave entrance, a cold draft swept out, carrying the smell of damp earth and something else, something faint but unmistakable, the metallic scent of blood. We paused, exchanging glances. Mara tightened her grip on Ellie's hand, and I raised my rifle, scanning the dark mouth of the cave. Inside, we could hear faint voices, whispers, and the soft shuffle of movement. The survivors Lily spoke of were here, but so was danger. We moved in carefully, stepping over slick stones and into shadows that swallowed the light. The cave walls closed in, narrowing the path, but the voices grew clearer. We found a small group huddled around a dying fire, men, women, and children, faces gaunt and eyes wary but alive. They looked up as we entered, surprise giving way to cautious hope. Their leader, a tall man with a scarred cheek and tired eyes, greeted us. "You've come far," he said quietly. "We're running out of food, and the walkers are getting closer every night." I nodded. "We have a plan to reach a safe shelter. A place where a vaccine is being developed. If we can make it there, we have a chance." The leader studied me. "We'll go with you." That night, the cave was alive with quiet chatter and whispered plans. I set watches near the entrance while Mara helped tend to the children. Owen checked weapons and supplies, making sure we were ready. Sleep was scarce, but hope had found its way into the darkness. The next morning, we moved out as one. The group was larger now, 13 strong, and every step felt heavier with the weight of responsibility. We had to protect them all. The journey ahead was perilous, but the promise of safety pulled us forward. The forest seemed different on the second day after the cave, thicker, darker, and full of hidden threats. We moved cautiously, every sense on high alert. The infected were fewer in number, but no less dangerous. Every shadow could hold death. Late in the afternoon, we came upon an old ranger station. It was damaged but intact, a possible place to rest and resupply. Inside, we found canned food, a water purifier, and a cache of ammo. The group breathed a collective sigh of relief. But safety was fleeting. As dusk fell, a loud crash echoed from outside. Raiders. They were closing in fast, shouting and firing wildly. We scrambled to form a defensive line. The children and the weakest were ushered into the ranger station's small cellar while the rest of us prepared for a fight. The battle was fierce and brutal. I fired steadily, picking off attackers while Jacob and Owen flanked the others. Mara moved swiftly, helping the wounded and keeping Ellie close. Despite our efforts, the raiders pressed hard. One managed to breach the entrance, only to be met with a swift end from Jacob's shotgun. After what felt like hours, the raiders retreated, leaving behind broken equipment and bloodied ground. We counted our losses minor but painful and tended to the wounded. The fight had taken its toll, but it also strengthened our resolve. That night, around the dying embers of our fire, the radio crackled once more. The voice was clearer than ever, broadcasting news of safe zones expanding and the vaccine nearing final trials. Relief washed over us, mingling with exhaustion and grief. I looked around at the faces illuminated by the firelight, faces worn by hardship but alight with a fragile hope. "We're getting closer," I said quietly. "Keep moving. Keep fighting." Ellie reached out and took my hand, her small fingers gripping mine tightly. "We'll make it," she whispered. And for the first time in a long time, I believed her. The morning fog hung low over the forest floor as we moved out from the ranger station, the air thick with moisture and the scent of pine. The forest was alive with the sounds of small animals rustling and birds calling, but beneath it all was a tension we couldn't shake. Every step felt heavier, weighed down by the knowledge of what lay ahead. Our group had grown tight, 13 souls bound by hope and survival, but that didn't make the journey any easier. I kept my rifle at the ready, scanning every shadow, every movement, while Jacob and Owen flanked the group, their eyes sharp for threats. Mara stayed close to Ellie, whispering reassurances that even she seemed to believe. The path led us deeper into the woods, where the trees grew tall and thick, their branches interlocking overhead to form a natural canopy that blocked out the sky. It was darker here, the sunlight filtered and dimmed, making it harder to see. We moved slow, careful not to make noise, knowing that both the infected and the raiders could be lurking nearby. Every crack of a twig or rustle of leaves put us on edge. By midday, hunger gnawed at us, but the forest offered little in the way of food. We rationed what little we had, sharing jerky and dried fruits, trying to keep morale high. Ellie's laughter, soft but genuine, reminded us all why we kept moving. We couldn't let this darkness swallow us. As the sun began to dip, casting long shadows through the trees, we reached a small clearing where a forgotten hunting cabin stood. It looked sturdy, though weathered by time. We took it as a sign, a place to rest, regroup, and plan the final leg of our journey to the shelter. Inside, we found old supplies, cans of food, a rusty but usable stove, and a weathered map with hand-drawn notes marking safe paths and danger zones. Owen studied it closely, plotting the safest route for the days ahead. But safety was always fleeting. Just as we settled in for the night, distant gunshots echoed through the woods, sharp, sudden, and close. The raiders were near, hunting for easy prey. I bolstered the group's defenses, positioning lookouts, and setting traps around the cabin. We huddled inside, every sense on high alert, waiting for what might come. Hours passed with tense silence until the unmistakable sound of footsteps approached the cabin. Shadows moved at the edge of the clearing, and the door rattled with forceful knocks. We held our breath. Then, a voice, desperate, frightened, called out, "Please, we mean no harm. Let us in." After a brief exchange, we cautiously allowed 3 survivors inside, an elderly couple and a young man, all worn thin by the endless fight. They told us of their own narrow escapes and warned of the raiders' growing numbers. The more people we gathered, the harder it became to stay hidden, but together, we were stronger. That night, as the fire crackled, the radio buzzed with news of increasing vaccine distribution and expanding safe zones. The hope in that broadcast was like a lifeline, pulling us through the darkness. I looked at the faces around me, scarred, tired, but unbroken, and I knew we would make it. We had to. We left the cabin before dawn, the forest still cloaked in shadows and the faint scent of damp earth hanging heavy in the air. The group was quieter than usual, weighed down by exhaustion but driven by the glimmer of hope the radio broadcast had given us. I took point, moving carefully through the thick underbrush, every sense alert to the smallest sound or movement. Jacob and Owen flanked us, their rifles ready. Mara stayed close to Ellie, who clung to her mother's hand, her small face pale but determined. The path ahead was uncertain, marked by broken trees and tangled roots. Our progress was slow but steady, each step a battle against the wild, reclaiming what had once been human territory. The infected were fewer here, but their presence was a constant shadow, a reminder that death lurked just beyond the trees. Midway through the day, we came across a small stream trickling through the rocks. The water was clear but cold, a welcome respite. We drank cautiously, using the portable filter to purify what we could. The children splashed quietly at the edges, their laughter a rare and precious sound that lifted spirits. As we moved deeper into the wilderness, the radio crackled again. The voice was stronger, the message clearer. The vaccine trials had passed key milestones, and safe zones were expanding. Relief and determination spread through the group. It was the first time in weeks that we allowed ourselves to believe in a future beyond survival. But hope came with its own dangers. By late afternoon, the forest thickened, and the trail narrowed to barely a footpath. The canopy above blocked out most of the sunlight, casting the woods into an eerie twilight. Suddenly, a branch snapped sharply ahead. We froze, weapons raised, eyes scanning the shadows. A figure emerged, a young woman, wounded and desperate, her clothes torn and face streaked with dirt and blood. She collapsed at our feet, gasping for breath. Mara knelt beside her, offering water and tending to the bleeding on her arm. Through ragged breaths, the woman introduced herself as Sarah. She had been separated from her group during a walker attack and had been surviving alone ever since. She begged to join us, and though the risk was high, we had no choice but to accept. The group grew, and with it, our responsibility. Every new life meant more food, more protection, more hope. We pressed on, hearts heavier but spirits stronger. Nightfall found us setting camp beneath ancient trees. I kept watch, rifle in hand, thoughts drifting between memories of the world before and the uncertain road ahead. Ellie slept fitfully, her small hand finding mine in the dark. We were survivors. We were fighters. And now, more than ever, we believed we would see the dawn. We awoke to a gray sky, the heavy clouds promising rain. The air was thick with moisture, dampening the earth beneath our feet as we broke camp and prepared to move. The group was weary but determined. Each day brought us closer to the shelter, the promise of safety, and the hope the vaccine offered. I took point once more, eyes scanning the dense forest for any sign of danger. Jacob and Owen flanked us, rifles at the ready, while Mara kept Ellie close, her gentle whispers steadying the girl's nerves. The path was narrow, barely a trail, winding between towering trees and tangled roots. The forest was quiet, almost too quiet. The usual chorus of birds and wildlife was absent, swallowed by an oppressive silence that made every sound our footsteps, our breathing feel amplified. I gripped my rifle tighter. This was no place for mistakes. Midway through the morning, we came across a small clearing. The sun struggled through the clouds, casting weak light onto a dilapidated cabin. It looked abandoned but sturdy enough to provide shelter if we needed it. Mara suggested we rest there, and I agreed. We approached cautiously, weapons raised, eyes sharp. The door creaked open to reveal dust-covered furniture and cobwebs, but no sign of recent life. It was a brief reprieve, a place to catch our breath and tend to the wounded. As we settled in, I tuned the radio. The broadcast was clearer than ever, the announcer's voice steady and filled with hope. Safe zones had expanded, vaccine distribution was underway, and survivors were being relocated to secure areas. Relief washed over me. We were close. The end of this nightmare was in sight. But the forest had one last test. As twilight approached, distant shouts echoed through the trees. Raiders. They were closing in fast, their voices angry and filled with menace. I signaled for everyone to prepare. We barricaded the cabin's entrances and set traps along the perimeter. The children were ushered to the back room, safe for now. The raiders arrived with a fury, battering the door and firing wildly. The fight was brutal and relentless. I fired steadily, picking off attackers one by one while Jacob and Owen flanked the others. Mara helped the wounded and kept Ellie close, whispering reassurances amidst the chaos. After what felt like hours, the raiders retreated, leaving behind shattered wood, spent shells, and a battered group of survivors. We tended to our injuries, exhaustion heavy but spirits unbroken. That night, around the dying embers of our fire, the radio crackled one final time with news of the vaccine's successful trials and the establishment of new safe zones. I looked around at the faces illuminated by the flickering light, scarred, tired, but alive. Ellie reached up and took my hand, her small fingers gripping mine tightly. "We made it," she whispered. And for the first time since the world fell apart, I believed her. The morning sun broke through the trees with a soft golden light, casting long shadows across the forest floor. After the brutal night we'd endured, the quiet felt almost unreal. The wounds we carried, both seen and unseen, reminded us of how close we'd come to losing everything. But here we were, still standing, still moving forward. The air was crisp, filled with the scent of pine and earth, a reminder that life endured even in the darkest times. We gathered our belongings, packing carefully to conserve energy and resources. The radio crackled faintly, the hopeful voice from the broadcast confirming what we already believed: the vaccine was out, safe zones were expanding, and the world was beginning to heal. Ellie looked up at me with wide eyes, her small hand finding mine. "Are we really safe now?" I smiled, squeezing her hand gently. "We're getting there. One step at a time." We followed the trail that would lead us to the nearest safe zone, the path now feeling less like a fight and more like a journey home. The group moved with a renewed sense of purpose, the weight of fear lifting ever so slightly with every mile. Along the way, we encountered other survivors who had made it through the chaos, their faces weary but hopeful. We exchanged stories, shared supplies, and offered words of encouragement. It was a reminder that even in the bleakest times, humanity found a way to endure and connect. As we neared the outskirts of the safe zone, armed guards greeted us, guiding us through checkpoints and into a community buzzing with life and rebuilding efforts. Children played in safe yards, gardens flourished where fields once lay fallow, and hope was tangible in the air. Mara knelt beside Ellie, tears glistening in her eyes. "We made it, Ellie. We're safe." I looked out over the bustling community, feeling a surge of gratitude. The road had been long and hard, filled with loss and danger, but it had led us here toward a future where the nightmare was ending, and new beginnings were possible. That night, as the group settled into secure shelters, I tuned the radio one last time. The broadcast spoke of continued vaccine distribution, rebuilding cities, and reunions with lost loved ones. It was a world slowly waking from a dark sleep. I sat outside beneath the stars, the cool night breeze carrying the faint sounds of laughter and life. Ellie rested against me, her breathing steady and calm. I allowed myself to hope, truly hope, that this was the dawn we had been fighting for all along. The fight was far from over, but for the first time, I saw light breaking through the darkness. And that made all the difference.